want to talk about this with former Ohio Governor John Kasich, an MSNBC political analyst. You ran against Donald Trump briefly in 2016. You're a governor, a former congressman. You know this whole, political landscape. How long is this going to last? What if there's indictment after indictment? Does he build on the victimization? Does it help him even more with the primary voters?
Yeah. I think, Andrea, in this case, there are a lot of Republicans that say, is this really a legitimate and fair charge? And frankly, no one is above the law, but what would be interesting to find out is how's everybody else been treated, because a public figure shouldn't have more scrutiny than anybody else. So a lot of Republicans are like, this is really political. And I talked to some folks this morning in the gym. They're like, we wish he'd just go away. But look, when you look at Georgia, and there isn't anybody, no Republican or Democrat that's knowledgeable, that doesn't look at the Georgia grand jury or the documents case, which seems to be percolating even more. I mean, I think that just works. I think that's kind of the end of it. I mean, I suppose Republicans could put up with this thing, and we see how the trial goes, right? You have to see what happens at the press conference today with the prosecutor, and how does Trump handle himself today? I noticed, Andrea, that some of the Republican support has slipped from him. He's still up there at 80%, but it's not like the 90-some. And the country itself says that the indictment should go forward. But I suspect that if, in fact, Atlanta, Georgia comes back on the vote pressure scheme or either the document case, I think that's going to be too much water for him to take. But, he's like the master of escape, and we just have to wait and see. But here's what I do know. There's no way the guy's going to be president, because there's no way these independent voters and Republicans who are sort of normal people, who are the traditional Republicans, let me say that. I don't want to call anybody abnormal, but traditional Republicans, there is no way in a million years that those people are going to vote for him. So my view is he'll never be president. And, it's a pathetic day. The other thing I want to say, Andrea, is I watched yesterday, these cars coming out of Mar-a-Lago. We got to put the cameras on, 9 cars coming out. Then we show the airport. Then we show the plane. It's like reminds me, I had a flashback. It was like the old empty podium. I mean, we've got to it's ridiculous. It's not that interesting. There's more interesting things happening, but somehow I guess we're fixated on it.
I would just say that the empty podium was to bring people into a speech, and arguably, while showing the cars, we were all doing interviews. I was interviewing Asa Hutchinson, saying that he should get out of the race. So that was not exactly the same as saying, tune in, stand by. We're going to have him speak momentarily on an historic day, just to point out. Chris?
Yeah, this is Governor. It's Chris Jansing, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit over the last week or so. This is America, but it's also one that President Trump believes he can turn into a good day for himself. We've discussed the fact that he's raised a lot of money. But I want to ask you about places like Ohio, which you know so well. It's a state where Trump beat Biden 53 to 45%. And so, look, I mean, for a place, by the way,
where I smashed him in the primary.
Yeah.
I beat him by, a couple 100,000 votes. But so I do understand the state.
You understand it. And I would also argue, maybe based partly on my family and friends back in Ohio, that those traditional people you talk about, well, many of them are following this with rapt attention. Other people have lives to live. So I wonder if your overall sense is that there is an exhaustion from Donald Trump by many of his voters, or is it more defiance? What are you feeling in your state?
I think there's a lot of exhaustion, and even people who are supporting him at this moment thinking that this is some political deal, they're exhausted. Now, his core base, he can do just about anything, and they hang with him. But I think there is a level of exhaustion. Andrea asked a good question about this, but when you move down to Georgia, if something else happens there or the documents case happens, I think exhaustion is sort of like water in a boat. It begins to overflow the boat. and begins to sink him. But we've got to see what happens in those cases. There's no way we can predict the future, and it's going to be. But I think you hit it. There's just people are just tired. They just want this to go away. And we saw it both when he ran for re-election and we saw it in the midterms. People are like, I'm fed up with all this stuff. And so those independents came out, many of them Republicans, and they delivered a significant, I think, win in many respects for the Democrats in the midterm election. And they've been winning these special elections. So I think people are just tired of this.
I want to ask you about those midterms and what it means for down ballot races in 2024. But just to remind our viewers, we're 10 minutes from 1 o'clock. We're still waiting. We're still watching 56th Street in New York City. Down there on your screen underneath that maroon awning, 45 awning, where Donald Trump should be walking out. We've seen a larger gathering of men in navy blue suits around that doorway, so we do expect it to happen pretty soon. Remember, the indictment itself, the hearing is expected for 2:15 this afternoon. Donald Trump will have to get down to the courtroom first, enter the courtroom, be processed before he heads up to the courtroom to be indicted in front of the judge. So that will take some time. We do expect him to be leaving Trump Tower in order for that all to remain on time pretty soon. Governor, let's talk about the down ballot races. Look back, 2018, 2020, 2022. Republicans haven't done so well, especially Republicans in competitive races who were campaigning on Donald Trump-style politics, MAGA-style politics. If it remains the case in 2024 that Republicans running in the shadow of Trump do not do well, is that the point where the Republican Party starts to make a break from Donald Trump? I know we've asked this question 1,000 times, but is that the end?
It's such a good point because, look, when you keep losing over and over again, whether you're a football team or a basketball team or whether you're a political operation, you've got to decide when enough's enough, when you're going to change. And the agenda what agenda? I can't figure out what their agenda is. It's anything Biden's for, they're against, or anything the Democrats are for, they're against. They've got to start relating to people about what people care about. I'll tell you, particularly among women, I heard it this morning, this gun violence is a big issue. They can't put their heads in the sand on the gun violence issue. What about the fact that we have rising prescription drugs? What are we going to do about a border that, nothing is working on the border? You got 14-year-old kids who are immigrant children. Think about this is disgraceful, Andrea. These immigrant kids come over to the United States. They don't have a guardian. We find out they're in a meat packing plant at the age of 14. They should be standing up against this, and it's because we can't get a program involving immigration, so we don't have enough workers, so they turn to children. So they got to have an agenda. If you have an agenda, you can win. If all you are is negative, forget it. I'm not interested in buying.